On the 16th of April 2020, in a small town on the outskirts of Dallas, a new Chick-Fil-A had its grand opening. As far as new locations go, its timing was actually far from ideal. A national emergency for COVID had been declared just a month beforehand, and its location right off the highway wouldn't do it much good when nobody was going anywhere. But even despite these early setbacks, this single location had an immediate and noticeable impact on the economy of the township around it. In the following months, despite wider economic slowdowns, the state's comptroller office reported sales tax revenue had increased by between 30 and 40% year over year in that area. Now, that would be impressive enough by itself at a time when consumer spending was otherwise cratering. But this store was also not alone. These sales increases came on top of a baseline that was set by more than half a dozen other major fast food chains that were already operating within this highway off-ramp, not to mention a Home Depot and a Walmart supercenter. If all of that wasn't enough, locations like this can materially impact real estate values and wages in surrounding areas after they open. And I mean, look, their chicken is pretty tasty. But how is it possible for what is still ultimately just another fast food chain to have a bigger impact on the local economy than everything else combined? Well, there are a few reasons, and the first is the economically measurable lengths that people will go to get a chicken sandwich. According to the information we have, the average freestanding Chick-fil-A location brought in $9.4 million in revenue last year, while for comparison, the average McDonald's brought in a little under $4 million. It also achieved this outperformance despite a much smaller menu, with fewer opportunities for upcharges, and the small detail that every single location is closed on a Sunday. Which means that they have 6/7 of the regular trading week to pull that revenue from. But despite all of these hurdles, their restaurants achieve this anyway because people are statistically willing to go a lot further out of their way to eat one, when compared to basically any other fast food chain. Part of this is simply that people really like Chick-fil-A, combined with the fact that there just aren't that many of them. As of making this video, there are just under 3,000 Chick-fil-A locations in the USA, compared to almost 14,000 McDonald's. So for a lot of Americans, getting to one of their restaurants is just the right kind of inconvenient. By statistically forcing people to go a little bit further from a wider catchment area, it turns a fast food run into a meaningful outing. Industry drive-through studies found that 77% of visits to a Chick-fil-A had 3 or more cars waiting in the queue at any given time, while at McDonald's, the second busiest chain measured, the figure was less than 42%. Now, I know that a location doing roughly double the total sales, having roughly double the cars in the drive-thru, might not sound like a mind-blowing statistic. But despite being presented in a kind of confusing way, this actually represents consistently more foot traffic, or wheel traffic, I guess, being pulled into one of these locations. For a local economy that lands one of these stores, this is a big win because people will rarely go that far out of their way for a McDonald's meal, something that's supposed to be the convenient option, but they demonstrably will for a Chick-fil-A. In Anna, that small town from earlier, this acted as a bit of an economic multiplier buff for everything else around it. The 30 to 40% jump in sales tax collections to the comptroller recorded was not because the new restaurant alone was somehow doing an extra third of the entire town's sales on top of every business that was already there. It was instead pulling people in from the surrounding towns north of Dallas to come and get a chicken sandwich, and while they were in the area, they might stop by the Home Depot or the Walmart or pick up a Starbucks to wash down all that fried chicken goodness. In its opening weeks, the queue of cars reportedly stretched a quarter of a mile down the road, conveniently right past the entrance of that same Walmart supercenter. It also helped that this location was adjacent to a highway already helping to bring people in from far and wide. Now, I've spoken about this effect before with Costco. Their warehouses have a similar gravitational pull on the communities and small businesses around it. But unlike a Costco, which will happily sell its members everything from groceries to glizzies to gold bars, the narrow menu of a Chick-Fil-A means their customers still have most of their shopping left to do in the surrounding stores. And while they're out of the house anyway, why not get some shopping done, right? It's also worth noting that while Chick-fil-A locations are still relatively rare by fast food standards, they are far more common than these supercenters. There are only around 640 Costco warehouses in the entire country, and unlike a massive warehouse, a Chick-fil-A location can slot in alongside other businesses instead of being relegated to industrial areas of a city. Now, another variable I failed to mention in that video is that this isn't necessarily magically creating economic activity out of thin air. Pulling people into an area for them to do their shopping generally means they're going to be spending less everywhere else. If someone gets lunch before visiting a Costco or stops by Walmart before picking up a Chick-fil-A, they aren't normally going to go home to get an additional lunch or buy a second basket of whatever it is that Americans buy from Walmart. So across an entire region, these stores don't generate economic activity as much as they just pull it around. But more locally, that doesn't really matter. If anything, it makes it more important for a small town to get one of these retail magnets to make sure that their own residents don't get pulled away somewhere else. This trend is now so well documented that it has a material impact on the value of the land these restaurants are parked on. The magnetic draw of these locations is so reliable that landlords will actually offer the Chick-fil-A Corporation specifically favorable terms just to get them in the door. They do this because they know that having a Chick-fil-A inside their commercial precinct will let them charge higher rents to every other tenant. Other stores are usually happy to pay that premium because they know shoppers will be coming for the chicken, and while they're there, they might stop by their store as well. Now, this isn't entirely unique to just this chicken shop. In commercial real estate, these businesses are broadly called magnet or anchor tenants. Anchor tenants are considered so important that other shops in a strip mall will often have co-tenancy clauses written into their contracts which say that if the anchor ever leaves the center, they either get to pay reduced rent or they're free to walk away from their lease entirely. The difference is that usually these anchors are big box destination stores like supermarkets, major retailers, and hardware chains, the kind of places that people will specifically go out for because they know they need something. But Chick-fil-A has such a well-documented draw that commercial real estate investors treat their comparatively puny 5,000 square foot chicken restaurant as an anchor in its own right. On top of this, the company also happens to be a legendarily good tenant. The business itself carries very little debt and signs 20-year leases with corporate guarantees and built-in rent increases of 2 to 3% a year. The desirability of renting to Chick-fil-A locations has actually turned their restaurants into an asset class of their own. There are some real estate investors who will now specifically only buy land that has a Chick-fil-A sitting on top of it. The average single-unit retail property in America, with a large corporate tenant, currently sells at a yield, or cap rate in industry terms, of around 6.5%. For smaller companies, or even other franchises with individual owners, that rate can easily be as high as 10%. In plain English, if a location is making $1 million a year in rental profits after costs, it would be expected to sell for $10 million. But Chick-fil-A locations are different. They routinely trade at cap rates of 4.2 to 4.5%, the lowest of any restaurant chain in the country, below household names like McDonald's and Starbucks. Put another way, if you happen to drop a Chick-fil-A location onto the same patch of real estate, the market would now consider it to be worth $20 to $25 million. This is uniquely beneficial to their particular franchise model, for reasons we'll get into soon. But even just when setting up a new location, it can enable some creative financial engineering. The Chick-fil-A company itself owns a lot of the land it builds on, so when a new store lifts the value of everything around it, the company is, in real estate terms at least, kind of blowing its own sales. But even when it doesn't own the dirt, most of its recent expansion has been done on ground leases, which means that the landlord owns the block and Chick-Fil-A rents it. But from there, the company is responsible for everything, including paying for and constructing the actual building that it plops on top of that dirt. For the investors, this is a great deal. They basically get to sit back and collect rent on a literal empty field that's now worth twice as much, all while one of the most reliable tenants in the country deals with all the headaches that typically come from managing a property. Which raises the fairly obvious question: what does Chick-fil-A get out of being this generous? Well, there are a few simple, practical economic motivations behind the genuinely unusual way this company is actually run. To own a Chick-fil-A franchise takes millions of dollars, but you can build your own branded product line today with basically nothing up front. It's called print on demand, and this video's sponsor, Printify, has quietly become the biggest infrastructure layer for it. The model is simple. You upload a design, put it on a hoodie, a mug, a poster, whatever, and list it in your store. Nothing gets printed until someone orders. Then Printify prints that one item through print partners in the US and Europe and ships it straight to the buyer. That flips the economics of merch. No inventory risk, no upfront costs, no minimum order of 500 hoodies. Your store plugs into Etsy, Shopify, TikTok Shop, and the other big platforms, and your margin is whatever you charge above Printify's price. Most stores stay small side projects, and that's fine, but some merchants on the platform run stores doing $300,000 a month because the infrastructure supports scaling at your own pace. The link is in the description. Signing up is free, and the first 100 people to use code MICRO get 15% off their first order. Okay, so before getting into the secret sauce behind Chick-fil-A's business model, every time I make one of these videos, I feel like it's important to point out that it's very easy to anthropomorphize certain companies and assume that some of them are nice, while others are just big meanies. The reality is that they're all just institutions, run by management teams following logical incentives. So Chick-fil-A isn't boosting local economies, wages, or property values out of the goodness of its corporate heart. It's doing it because it makes good business sense for the family that still owns and runs it. Now, that family ownership does mean that unlike regular public companies, it can afford to think a little bit further forward than next quarter's financial results. But despite the curated PR, they're still incredibly wealthy and savvy business people with a desire to expand and get even wealthier. The company is more than happy to highlight its own economic gravity because that reputation lets it negotiate better terms with the people who want a piece of it. Developers and land speculators know that convincing a Chick-fil-A to set up shop on their property massively increases the value of their land, and local governments know that approving a new location comes with a boost to their sales tax receipts, jobs, and hungry customers, which for a small town local council is a very easy yes.
I want to sell this lot to Punchburger. Here's why. We make money, they make money. They make burgers, we eat burgers. That's a win, 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 win.
It's also an important relations angle for a company that has not been without its controversies. This kind of strategic generosity is particularly noticeable in what these stores do to local labor markets. Chick-fil-A stores are heavily staffed, even relative to their increased sales at a particular location. Those staff also typically get paid slightly better than the industry standard. Team members average around $15 an hour with decent benefits against something closer to $13 or $14 at a typical McDonald's or Wendy's, usually without any benefits at all. A single new location can therefore soak up a decent chunk of the town's entry-level workforce, at rates the businesses around it now have to compete with, which, for the people of Anna, Texas at least, was a pretty good deal. Now by itself, a few extra dollars an hour usually isn't enough to pull workers from one fast food brand to another, and even if it was, competitors could normally just replace those staff with somebody else anyway. But once again, Chick-fil-A is slightly different. Because for a lot of people in those kitchens, the real draw is the chance, however slim, of one day being handed the keys to an entire store, thanks to one of the strangest franchise models in the industry. If somebody wants to own a McDonald's, the total cost of opening a location can easily run into the millions of dollars. and before the company will even seriously talk to them, they generally need around $500,000 of their own liquid cash. This means McDonald's franchises are effectively high-end investment products, reserved for people who are already fairly wealthy and probably don't actually want to spend their days working in a fast food kitchen. Chick-Fil-A, on the other hand, charges its franchisees, which it calls operators, a single $10,000 fee to open a new store, and corporate then covers all the remaining costs in finding and building a new location. In return for that very modest upfront investment, Chick-fil-A franchise owners can expect to make well into the six figures, with operators in some locations reportedly taking home over $500,000 every year. It's a great deal, but it does come with strings attached. The first is that the company is incredibly selective about who actually gets to own one of its stores. In a typical year, it receives around 60,000 applications and selects roughly 80 new operators, an acceptance rate of around 0.13%, which is significantly lower than any Ivy League university. There are also hard restrictions attached on what people can do once they're selected. An operator cannot be a passive investor. They must be physically present running their store, and outside of a few very narrow exceptions, one operator is only ever allowed to own one location. Sure, the company pays for the land, the building, and the fit-out, but in return, it takes 15% of gross sales plus 50% of whatever net profit is left over at the end, and most importantly, for all intents and purposes, it still owns the store and can replace a franchisee at any time with a long list of people just waiting for the opportunity. For a lot of people, that's a life-changing amount of money, in a job they can realistically work their way into from the fry station, without a college degree, for an entry-level fee that almost anybody could borrow if they really needed to. From the company side, it gets to handpick from an enormous pool of applicants, who will be intensely dedicated to their single location, and who share a direct financial incentive to squeeze the most out of every store. This filters all the way down to the entry level. Even junior staff dropping waffle fries can see the role as a very long audition for one of the best paying management jobs in fast food, in what would anywhere else be just a minimum wage shift. Oh, and getting rid of an underperforming operator is also far easier than removing something like a McDonald's franchisee who has millions of their own capital sunk into the business. All of this means corporate gets very little pushback from its operators and can, within reason, treat them as extremely well-paid subordinate store managers who will do as they're told. This is also why those favorable rental agreements from earlier matter so much. The company isn't necessarily motivated by getting the lowest possible rent, because that cost largely flows through the operator anyway. But it is very interested in securing the best possible locations to maximize revenue and therefore its own cut. This does raise one last question though. If operators are only paying in a token amount of money for a fast food management job that pays several times what that same role would pay anywhere else, and corporate is putting up all of the liquid capital to build the stores in the first place, why doesn't the company just run the stores itself and keep everything? There is presumably a corporate-approved answer about opportunity and community or whatever. I'm sure maybe the dream of one day getting a store really does make everybody smile just a little harder at the drive-thru. But the practical answer is that arranging things this way clears the legal hurdles to make sure that every restaurant counts as a separate business, operating under the Chick-fil-A brand. The company keeps most of the upside while shielding itself from the liabilities that come with directly employing tens of thousands of people to fry chicken, shifting it along to the franchisees themselves. The operators in turn happily accept it because it genuinely is a ladder up for people who would rarely be offered that kind of opportunity anywhere else. Maybe it's a bit of an unflattering comparison, and I'm sure that Chick-fil-A itself probably wouldn't like it, but they're kind of like glorified and very well compensated gig workers. The company handles most of the overhead and brings in customers, but the contractors themselves are then responsible for how much they make and also everything that they screw up. The $10,000 fee is really only a token legal requirement to trigger the definition of a franchisee within America in the first place. It's still a win-win that gives the company all the benefits of running its own stores with the separation and built-in motivation that comes with running a franchise. The only real reason other chains don't copy this model is that it's a very long-term play. Collecting millions in franchise fees up front and leveraging the real estate is far easier when private equity or public shareholders are prioritizing immediate returns. But if you enjoyed, go and watch this one next to find out how a single Costco warehouse effectively does the same thing, just on a much larger scale. And make sure to subscribe for more simple, practical economics.